Okay, Dr. Smith, thanks a lot for waiting. And I'm really honored to have you here. Our students are really excited to learn more about research and especially about action research. I will introduce you a little bit. So for our students, today we have Dr. Richard Smith, and he has an expertise in the fields of language teaching, history, learner and teacher autonomy, teacher research, ELT research capacity building, and teaching in difficult circumstances. He has published widely and given invited talks, seminars, and workshops in many countries. Dr. Smith, I'm very honored, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to your students, to speak to your colleagues at the National University in Ecuador. So I've never visited Ecuador. I have visited Chile, and I visited Peru once, and I'm in Argentina, and I'm going to later talk a little bit about some of the work I did with teachers in those countries. And I'm going to talk, and the topics of this seminar series the topic is research. So let me start with a few reflections about research in our field. So I think you can see my slides here. I'm going to be talking about okay. So the general topic is language teaching research. I'm going to talk about involving teachers in teaching research, language teaching research, or educational research. So this is what I plan to do. First of all, I plan to talk about a gap which is quite well recognized between research and practice. So the relevance or accessibility of research for teachers, and why there is a gap, and what are some solutions that have been proposed. One of those solutions might be what we call participatory research. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but mainly, as Tanya said, I'm going to talk mainly about teacher research, and one of those kinds of research that teachers do is called action research. And that's where I will talk about my experience with teachers in Chile, in Peru, of teachers actually doing research themselves. I think this relates quite well to Professor Jan's talk just earlier, because I agree with him that we need to have a disruptive kind of innovation, not just accept all of the textbooks, all of the things that we are told we have to do as teachers, but we have to really be reflecting and experimenting and discovering for ourselves. And I think Professor Jan showed some very good examples of how teachers can be innovators. And I think I'm going to follow on from that and say the same thing in a different way, that teachers can be researchers. They don't have to just accept research which is done on them. They can be involved in research. Then I'm going to talk about, well, sharing teacher research, how to share, or where we can find research done by teachers. Finally, I'm going to talk to teacher educators about how we can support teachers and student teachers to do research. So you can see number 3, 4, and 5, it's about teachers actually doing research. But let me begin with this problem, the research practice gap. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I think it's generally recognized in our field of language teaching that there is a lot of research done at universities about language teaching. My field is TESOL, teaching English for speakers of other languages. But there is a lot of research done in different universities in the States, in the UK, in Europe, and in your country, in Latin America, generally in Asia. But more and more research is done at universities. However, it's generally recognized that most teachers don't engage with this research. They don't read the research. They don't really know about the research. And there are a lot of complaints by academics, especially, that although they do lots of research they think should be useful, that it doesn't reach teachers. Teachers don't engage with it. So that you can read articles in different journals these days about which academics are writing to complain about this situation. But is it really an issue? Is it really an issue? Is it really a problem? Or is it an issue actually more for academics than for teachers? Academics who want to be useful, they want to have impact, they are worried that their research doesn't have impact, it doesn't reach teachers. Does it really bother teachers? I don't think so. I think the teachers I work with, they teach and they don't really worry about this problem. So I think it's a kind of academic issue. And in fact, teachers say that most academic research is inaccessible or irrelevant to their lives. And I think I agree with what teachers say. I think most academic research is published in journals which teachers cannot read. Why? Because they're often something they have to pay for. If you are a university student, you have maybe free access to journals, but if you become a teacher, you have to pay for journals, and you don't have the money as a teacher to pay for journals. So research is not accessible. It's also inaccessible in a different way, which is that academic research is written in a particular kind of language, a particular jargon, particular style or register of language. If it's in English or if it's in Spanish, it's written in academic language, which is not written for teachers. They're written for other academics. The audience for the research is usually other academics. So there are these two issues, big issues of accessibility. Research is not accessible. It's also, teachers will say that the research they read is not really about the problems that are facing them, or that the research is not really addressing issues or problems that are important for them. Research is often addressing issues which are part of academic debate, but are not really coming from the classroom. I think I would agree with that. So there is a research practice gap. What is it a problem? Is it a problem for teachers? Let's look at it from teachers' point of view. And I think that it is a problem from teachers' point of view, because I think teachers can benefit from research which is accessible and which is relevant. If we didn't have research, if we don't have any research about language teaching, what would the situation be like? I think teachers would be, even more than now, they would be victims of fashion. They would have less agency because they would have to follow the latest fashion or the latest government decisions without any ability to decide what is right or what is good for their students, according to research. And I think therefore research is needed in our field for teachers benefit, so that we are not just victims of fashion or victims of commercial sales. So I think that research is necessary, but we need to think how to make research accessible, how to make research relevant. Let's think about making research accessible, first of all. As I said, journals are something you have to pay for. But more and more, journals are trying to, or researchers are trying to make their research open access. This is a movement in these days that researchers, if they can, will make their research open access so that people don't have to pay. There are platforms like academia.edu, where you can find research done by teachers. Journals themselves are making some of their articles open access and free. For example, the journal that I am involved with is called ELT Journal, and every issue there is one article, at least one article, which is free to read. So please do explore different journals and see what is open access, even as a teacher. Another proposal that is made these days is that academics should write short summaries of research in plain language, easy language. So you can find some of these summaries. Another proposal that is sometimes made is that one I just showed, which is to involve teachers in synthesizing or mediating research. I would like to share with you a website actually, which is the website of Reiselt. And let me also copy that link into your chat so that you can explore this, because I think it's worth looking at. And since 10 years ago, a association has developed in Chile, which is called Reiselt. I think it's a Red Network, Red de Investigadoras, Chilenas, the ELT, English Language Teaching. Now, this is something where academic researchers come together with teachers and students, and they try to support one another. And one project they had is this one about infographics. It's a recent project where they are teachers are looking at research or thinking together what is a problem that they want to solve, and their colleagues, friends who are teachers, who are researchers, are helping them to find research which is relevant for them. And they then make an infographic like this. So the example here is that teachers said they want to learn more about the social, emotional side of learning. And the researchers in this group helped them to find articles which would be relevant. Then together they summarized the articles, and they found some practical implications, practical recommendations. And then they made an infographic like this. So that's an interesting approach, and perhaps in Ecuador you might think about something similar, maybe. I think it's a very interesting model. That's this third one, involvement of teachers in synthesizing or mediating research. Another thing that's been proposed is we need to, in universities, we need to develop teachers' research literacy, as in their ability to read research. So we know that research is written in a particular difficult kind of academic language. So one thing that universities, which are preparing teachers, can do is encourage students to read articles, hoping that when they become a teacher, they will have a better ability to read articles. Now, I don't think these solutions are enough, really, on their own. And I think that research also needs to be made relevant. And I think this requires a change of viewpoint, as I will explain. So I've been talking so far about engaging teachers with existing research, with academic research. But I think we need to move towards thinking about how can we engage teachers in research? How can we engage teachers in the process of research? And I include student teachers as well as teachers here. I've been talking about making research accessible, but I think we need to make sure that research is also relevant to teachers' concerns. And the best way to do that is to engage teachers in research. Because we know that a lot of research doesn't really meet teachers' needs, doesn't really meet teachers' priorities. Most research done at universities is for academics' benefit mainly. So maybe we need more classroom research, or classroom-based research, or classroom-oriented research. And of course, as Professor Jan said, we had the pandemic and we were teaching online. So I would include online as part of this classroom research. So research which looks at what goes on in classrooms, research which looks at what teachers do, what students do, how teachers behave, how students behave. That's one idea. But I think it's more than just a question of academics focusing on teachers and their concerns. It's not only that academics have to look at teachers and what they are interested in. I think there is also a need to engage teacher agency in participatory research. So my next part is about how can teachers themselves be engaged in academic research. Being participatory could be engaging teachers in academic research at different levels or different kinds of stages of research. These are stages of research which normally academics, university researchers, normally they decide on these things. But I think we can all think about how can teachers become engaged in decision-making in these areas. So how can teachers be engaged in formulating research goals or aims or questions? How can we engage teachers in deciding on or implementing research methods? How can we engage teachers in analyzing data, interpreting data? For example, actually member checking is something which is I encourage my students to do, my PhD students. If they are researching about teachers, researching about learners, maybe they do interviews with the teachers. The student then analyzes the data, but I encourage the student to go and show their analysis to the teacher or to the learner so that they can check they are interpreting according to how the teacher sees the world or how the student sees the world. And that's called member checking. So if you are doing research, it's a good thing to do. Writing up findings. Can we write an article together with teachers if we are academics? Can we present findings together with teachers at conferences and involve them as co-authors? So these are different parts of research, different stages of research. Being participatory or doing participatory research means thinking about engaging teachers in doing these things. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. Let me talk about one example here. This is a teacher association in Cameroon, an African country. And I visited this teacher association, gave some talks for the teacher association 10 years ago. And together with my PhD student, Harry Kucha, who comes from Cameroon, we decided that we could maybe help the teacher association to do research. So, in other words, to support teachers to do research and to help them to do the research. So I think in this way it was participatory. Let me explain what we did. At the conference they had in 2013, in my talk, I asked all of the people in the audience, there were about 300 teachers, to write down what questions they would like to have answered. What kinds of research questions would they like to have research done about? And here are some of the questions they wrote down on pieces of paper. And so, in other words, these are issues or problems that teachers in that context find important. For example, what accounts for students' absenteeism or poor attendance in English lessons at high school? Why do students indulge in collusion and cheating? Why do many teachers not go to professional development meetings? What methods of teaching are appropriate in teaching a multi-grade class, a class with mixed abilities, but also with different ages? Actually, multi-grade means different ages, because that's something that happens in Cameroon schools. And they have very large classes, maybe 100 or 150 children in one class. How can CAMELTA, that's the teacher association, convince the ministry to accept new ideas of teaching? I think just at that time, 2013, the TESOL Association, based in North America, had brought out a research agenda of issues they thought TESOL researchers need to address. But none of these issues were in that research agenda. These were issues that many teachers face in developing countries, global south countries. Maybe you face some of these issues, but they are not generally looked at by researchers in global north. And even in global south contexts, these issues are not usually looked at. So there are many issues, many questions or problems that teachers in countries of the global south in particular, teaching in large classes, low resource contexts, maybe teachers teaching many classes every week, many issues which are not addressed enough in research. This is one aspect of research practice gap. So we can go to teachers, we can ask teachers what questions they think should be researched. In fact, to tell the story a little bit more, we, together with Harry, my PhD student, this was not for his PhD thesis. This was for supporting teachers in the Teacher Association. We helped them to make a questionnaire. So there's a group of teachers in the Teacher Association who decided to take this research further, and we're together with them. We made a questionnaire. So basically, we were involving teachers in deciding on research questions. We were also involving teachers in making the research methods. I also encourage my PhD students to do participatory research. I think I'll for reasons of time, I won't share these examples, but just to say Harry himself engaged in some participatory research with teachers in Cameroon. And more recently, my other student, Jason, has been working together with another teacher association in India. And that's been very participatory because although it is a PhD thesis for Jason, he was influenced strongly by the teachers' ideas. Now that's participatory research, which is still a kind of academic research. But I think to deeply involve teachers in research, what about teacher research? So this is my main part of the talk to you today. So teacher research is a kind of practitioner research. Let me define what I mean by teacher research. Practitioner research is research carried out by practitioners. It could be a nurse, for example, who wishes to improve the way she interacts with patients. It could be a doctor, it could be a social worker, and they will be doing research into their own practice. In the same way, a teacher can research their own practice. So it's teachers doing their own research. And that's what I call teacher research. But I think there is still a role for academics or teacher educators to support them, to support teacher research, and I will talk later about that. And teacher research can be published academically, but it doesn't have to be published. It can be shared in other ways, as I will show you. So we don't have to follow all of the norms, all of the expected rules of academic research when we do teacher research. Teacher research is for teachers' own benefit and for their students. But let's before we talk a little bit more about teacher research, I think I've been talking a lot about research, but what is research? It's time for us to define it. Now, I could ask you in the chat maybe to be brave and to share some definitions of research. Does anybody like to try to do that? Would anybody like to, in a simple way, say what is research in general? If you would, just type into the chat. What is research? Okay. Well, think about it. I'll share some simple definitions. There's many people may think that teachers can't do research. Teachers are teachers. Person who wants to know. Thank you, Fanny. So you're talking about a researcher being someone who wants to know something. Yeah, exactly. Starts with a question, right? Creating new knowledge. Thank you. Finding new conclusions, Powell. Thank you. Angel says, looking into gaps to understand, and in this case, to improve professional practice in every field. Investigation, yes. Establishing facts and reaching new conclusions. Here is a very famous definition of research, and it's by Stenhouse, Lawrence Stenhouse, and he just calls it inquiry. Okay, systematic inquiry. So many of you have said finding answers or trying to look for answers. He emphasizes that's true, inquiry, but also systematic, being systematic. Let's see what that might mean. Because Hatch and Lazarton, they also emphasize being organized and systematic. And inquiry, searching for answers to the questions we ask. Now, I like this definition as well, because, oh, by the way, made public by Stenhouse, it can be publishing an article, it can be writing an article, but it doesn't have to be writing. It could be sharing with a poster in a presentation. Okay, let's come back to that later. So finding answers, searching for answers to the questions we ask. And finally, David Noonan says it is a process, research in general is a process of inquiry. There are three elements or components. I think this shows us what it means to be systematic. A question or a problem or a hypothesis, but I like to emphasize question. I think I do think, like some of you have said, curious, being curious, having questions, starting with a question, or maybe start with a problem, but then we have to turn the problem into a question to do research, because the next stage, as some of you have said, is getting data, generating or collecting data. Now, data is a technical word which really means information to answer a question. So information which is going to answer a particular question. We can see how it must be systematic. You have to start with a question, get data which is relevant to your question, and then analyze and interpret the data. So here is a simple, good description of the process of research. Now, I like to share these definitions of research with teachers because they are quite simple, they are quite down to earth. And I do believe research is useful for teachers. From my own experience as a teacher, also from my experience of working with teachers, research can be very useful, as I will show you, I hope. It can be very practical, but when we say research, in teachers' minds, they think it's too difficult for them. They usually think it's not for them. It's too complicated. It's too difficult. It's something that university researchers do, but they are practical people, and it is not for them. So I emphasize using simple, down-to-earth explanation and examples, as I will show you. But sometimes we need a technical word. I think data is a useful technical word. Information to answer a particular question. Right. So now we have some definitions of research. We can think about teacher research again. Now, some academics will say, teachers can't do research. They don't have the skills. they don't have the ability, but I think they can. Now, research done by teachers into issues which concern them, that's teacher research, or addressing questions that arise from your practice by gathering data, analyzing it, and sharing what you find. Another thing I should say is teacher research is for your own development as a teacher. It's to solve problems that are important for you and which are important for the learning of your students. And this is the major aspect of teacher research. It's not done for academics. It's not done to publish journal articles. It's done for local reasons, primarily for local reasons, for teacher development, for development of learning in that particular context. And then we can share, and it is useful for other teachers to hear about, as Stenhouse says, made public. But I don't think that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing in teacher research is that the problem, the issue, is a local problem, something that's important for the teacher. And if the new knowledge that comes from the teacher research is already known by some other people in other places, it doesn't matter. So the new knowledge is new knowledge for the teacher. So the teacher is gaining new knowledge. So it's research by teachers, for teachers, and their students. This is a slogan that we have used to promote teacher research. I'll give you an example of teacher research in 1 minute. But first, let me explain some types of practitioner research or types of teacher research. And the most famous type is action research. Action research involves having some kind of problem, thinking of some sort of solution, and experimenting with that solution. So my question is, what changes if I try out this solution? And you get data to see what happens, and then you analyze the data, and you can say, yes, this changed, this was good, this was successful. Something else did not change, for example, simply put. Exploratory practice is a kind of practitioner research developed actually in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, by someone called Dick Allwright in the field of English language teaching with his colleagues, Ines Miller, for example, Judith Hanks, and they've written about this if you're interested. They emphasize not trying to solve a problem, but trying to explore the situation in the classroom to understand the situation better. Exploratory action research is something I suppose I invented in Chile 10 years ago because I was invited there to help secondary school teachers to do action research. British Council invited me to introduce teachers to action research, but I thought action research is not really going to be the most suitable for them. I thought probably some exploration first is important before they try to solve their problem, and so we started to call it exploratory action research. Let me give you, and so my examples I share with you now will be about exploratory action research. Just before that, let me share with you, so let me take you gently or slowly into thinking how can teachers do research in the classroom. All right, let's my examples are going to come from teachers in quite difficult circumstances and not ideal situations, because some people think that only teachers who are very privileged, only teachers who have a lot of time can do research. I think I've worked with teachers in many contexts which are not like that. So I did a workshop in about 10 years ago with teachers in Kathmandu in Nepal. I did this workshop with Amal Padwad from India, who is sitting at the front. The topic of the workshop was teaching in low resource classrooms. because I've had an interest in helping teachers who are teaching in large classes, by which I mean maybe more than 50, maybe sometimes 100 students in a class, sometimes with no textbooks, maybe no technology, probably, in public education systems around the world. And so I was invited to give a workshop, but I didn't want to be telling the teachers how they should be teaching in such contexts, because I don't teach in such a context. What I wanted was, with Amal, was for teachers to share their own experiences. So that at the beginning of the workshop, that's what they did. There were teachers from Nepal, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from India. So I asked them not just to share problems. I wanted to start the workshop quite positively. So I asked them to share a successful teaching learning experience. And you might like to think about that yourself now, because it can be a good starting point for inquiry, to think more about what makes it successful. And not just to think, because thinking about it would be reflective practice, but to actually gather some data about what the students said about it, or why it was successful, maybe by writing about it. That would be a kind of teacher research. Anyway, we started the workshop with a discussion in the group. And then we asked the teachers to share in a new group by standing up and telling about your successful story. We did it again, because we had quite a lot of time, and sharing the story again. This was the third time. And finally, we had teachers sharing in front of the whole group. And we actually managed to video these as well. And we made a book, in case you are interested. This is a book of successful stories, successful experiences. I don't think it's not really exploratory action research, but it is teachers sharing experiences. The next step we did, and I will give you a link later where you can find this book and other resources. But the next step was to help teachers to talk about problems, share problems, not just successes, but to go further from problems into a kind of research. So the teachers do face many problems. This is Miriam, for example, from Pakistan. And one problem, it's difficult to get students' attention, to stop them working on a pair or group task in a large class of 100 students. She has many problems, actually. Another one, not all students participate due to being in a large class. Another problem was this one. It's difficult to promote active learning when the resources are limited. And another problem, I have too much homework to mark. It's impossible to give effective feedback to everyone. I'm sure that you face similar issues. Many teachers around the world do face these issues. Lots of problems. One thing we need to do, if we're going to try to solve problems, is turn them into questions, because if we just stay with the problem, we stay with that. If we can turn it into a how can I question, that can lead us forward into trying to find answers. So the first thing to do is encourage the teachers to turn problems into questions. But the other thing we need to do is to choose one question, because we can't look at everything all at once. So we encourage the teachers to, well, which one is most important for you? Which one is most urgent for you? Which one would be most useful to answer for your school, for example? So encouraging them to focus on one question. So that's the first thing we need to do. In fact, Miriam decided to work with one other person, and we can research together with others. She narrowed down to this question: how can we make students interested in group work when they show no interest? And then Mandeep's question was, how can we ensure that everyone in the group participates? So they decided to focus on group work in a large class environment. The next step in that workshop was to ask them to go and ask the participants to go around and look at the posters with the questions, and if they had some ideas from their own practical experience, to write their name on a small piece of paper. And then Miriam and Mandeep would go and interview the teachers who had volunteered some advice. And in the break, during this workshop, one teacher came up to me and said, are we doing research? Because is this research? She had heard about research, but she had never thought about doing research herself. And I said, yes, actually, this is a kind of research. It's kind of teacher research. So I wasn't promoting teacher research, but we decided that it is a kind of research. Something very useful and practical for these teachers. And they then presented to other teachers in the room about the ideas. And so the ideas were coming from people in the room. And they found very, very useful. What happened after the workshop, they then tried out ideas after the workshop, and they evaluated them and wrote about them. We helped them to write about them in this same book. So it was a kind of action research, because they they found questions, they found solutions, and they tried them out in their classrooms and found out if they worked or not. So that's just to show a simple example of what could be called action research. In 10 years ago, I was invited to Chile, as I said, to Santiago by the British Council. And the British Council thought that their teacher training was not really working. They thought the ideas were good, that they were doing training in, but the teachers were not putting them into practice. So they decided to try something different. They decided to try to introduce teachers to action research. But when I heard about the conditions, the situations of the teachers, working up to 40 lessons a week with classes of more than 40 students, and often having to move from school to school to earn money, I knew they would not have a lot of time to do action research. And action research is sometimes presented in a rather technical, academic way. And so I wanted to try to develop something which would be more realistic for teachers. I thought we should begin not with problems and trying to solve problems with experiments, but instead to explore the situation before taking action. This is what we did in the workshop. We had teachers talking together about their problems, sharing their problems. We then had the teachers deciding on questions which were important for them. This was one group. What makes it difficult for our students to understand and speak English? Or how can we involve parents into the English learning process of their children? These were important questions for these teachers. But instead of immediately trying to find solutions, in this workshop, we encouraged them to make exploratory questions which would take them further into exploring and understanding the situation as a group. And then later, because we had 1 year, later we would ask them, so what did you discover? What did you uncover about the situation? And on that basis, later, to decide on some solutions. And I would encourage you to read more if you are interested, because these are from Latin America. I'm going to share with you now a link to a website, a web page, where you can find all of these resources that I'm going to be sharing with you. So I've just shared with you the link here. Actually, this list of books and resources, they're all free, they're all open access. And the list is made by your mother, Aggie, Ellie Elizabeth Beckish, who I've been working with. So there is a connection. There is a connection there. Let me just actually share with you the website, because I think it's I can't say everything I want to say today, but I can I can guide you to look at some resources, and I hope excuse me, I hope you'll find these resources down to earth, teacher friendly, and useful. And I would recommend that you go and have a look at that one, which I wrote with Paulo Rebiedo from Chile, based on all of our experience over about 5 years with Chilean secondary school teachers, because this approach of exploratory action research turned out to be quite realistic and successful. And you can click on that link, and you'll find that we go to that book, handbook. It's got lots of pictures. It has lots of examples in this book. It will take you step by step through the process of doing exploratory action research. And just further down, if you do become very interested in this, there is a Facebook group you can join where we share examples of teacher research. Also, Ellie actually has divided into different parts of the world where teacher research is done. If we come down here, we can see that first book of stories of teacher research from Chile. You can also see that that project expanded to Peru, and it also expanded to Mexico, because this approach turned out to be quite effective and useful for teachers. And in each of these books, let me show you this one. This is the one from the first book from Chile. We tried to show how, so here are some of the issues. So these are the issues that different teachers wanted to look at: how to wrap up classes, what kinds of seating arrangements, how to improve participation, how to motivate students, how to encourage students to speak in English, and improving listening skills. So quite practical and down to earth, and I think you will see that first story, for example, we try to present it in a reader-friendly way with pictures. So I'm going to go back to my slides, but you have that link now, which you can explore, and I encourage you to explore. Okay, let me go back to my slides, and I'll share with you one example of exploratory action research. And afterwards, you tell me if this is research or not. Do you think it's research? Do you think it's good research? According to our definitions of research. This is my Marta, who's from Mexico. And you can see the title. And you can see that she presented about this research in a poster at a conference. So her context is a public middle school, class of 35 students. Her problem was that she found that students were being disruptive. After breaks, it took 10 minutes to get students to come inside from outside. She found that they were misbehaving. For example, laughing out loud, hitting things, getting up and leaving the room at the end of the class, especially at the end of the class before she had finished. And she had tried different things in the past, but she couldn't solve this problem. So we encouraged her to think about some research questions to explore the situation before trying to solve it. So when does misbehavior occur in the class? At what times in the class? What do I do when misbehavior occurs? And do students agree that they are misbehaving? So we break down the topic into smaller research questions. And with a mentor, we decided on these methods: to keep a video journal, to ask a colleague to observe her class, and to do a questionnaire. And this is what Martha found by exploring. From her own video journal, she found students misbehaved, especially at the beginning and the end of lessons. She didn't realize that before. She also found that her main strategy was punishment, but nothing that she did worked. And in the questionnaire, students agreed that they misbehaved, but not all agreed about what bad behavior meant, and many seemed unaware of how they should behave. So, having understood the problem, she could create a good action plan. So because students didn't all know what bad behavior meant, she asked them to create their own classroom rules in groups. And instead of punishing, she decided to practice positive reinforcement. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize is that her solutions are going to be quite good solutions, appropriate solutions in that context, because she has explored. She has based her solutions on understanding the situation. This is an important thing about exploratory action research. It's not just jumping in with a new solution, which may or may not be appropriate. It's based on what you have discovered from that exploration. So here is, she did some individual reflection on what rules are and why they are necessary. You can maybe see that that was done in Spanish, although it's an English lesson. Groups made posters from their writing of what rules they thought there should be. You can see the ideas. And that was in Spanish as well. They put the posters on the walls. That's one solution. And then when students arrived, she greeted them and told them she was happy to see them. And she was being positive. She praised good behavior. And what did she find? Because she repeated again the observation from her colleague to get data. The colleague said the students had started arriving on time, but they still chatted a lot. They got focused more quickly, and they're working in a more orderly way. And at the end of the class, their behavior totally changed. Nobody got up early to leave. So that's exploratory action research. We can see action research on the right is planning the change, acting, observing, reflecting. But before putting that plan into action, it's based on exploration. So planning to explore, exploring, analyzing before you have a plan of action. So this is basically what we mean by exploratory action research. Okay, what do you think? Do you think it was research? Do you think it was good research? Okay, do you think it was research? I mean, some academics might say, well, it's not very sophisticated, but it was useful and good research for this teacher in that context, and she learned some new things which she had never learned before. She couldn't learn just by reflecting. So that's why it's different from reflective practice. She's getting data to understand the situation and then getting data to see if her solution works. Okay, I realize that you might be getting a bit tired now because you've been listening to a lot of talking, but I do want to just emphasize a few things before we end. One is that the effect of doing exploratory action research for the teacher, the impact. I'd like you to read this yourselves. I won't read it aloud, but you can see the impact for Martha. And I think I would highlight a keyword there: empowered. Teachers often say that they felt empowered. Instead of a situation where they had many problems and they had no idea what to do about their problems, they often felt they had more power in their own hands to try to understand and try to uncover solutions. It's not a magic solution. It's not going to magically change the conditions in which we work. We still need to get together, have solidarity, and change our working conditions. But it can help teachers to feel more empowered in their working situations, not only to solve a particular problem, but to have a generally more empowered mindset. This is what we have discovered. And this is reflected in Mauro's comments here. He's from Chile. There we are. So that's Mauro, and I like that quote. But that is something that many of the teachers report. And we've worked with teachers now since 2013 in Chile, in Peru, in Mexico, also in Nepal and India. And a common perception is that although it is a little bit difficult, exploratory action research is not too impossible. It is possible in difficult situations, and it can help teachers to address difficult conditions in which they work. Another major finding is many teachers say the relationship with their students improves. And I think the reason, because of doing the research, I think the reason is that they are often asking students their perspectives about an issue through questionnaire or through asking them to write or talking with students. And the students sometimes have not really been involved themselves in discussing the classroom situation. Because of doing research, teachers are interacting better with students. So, as I said, I can't cover everything about exploratory action research, but I encourage you to look at this handbook. Briefly, I just want to briefly say that in that first year in Chile, we didn't really know what the end point would be. We didn't really know if we wanted teachers to write about their research. But we decided that we would not force them to write reports about their research because it was voluntary. They had volunteered. They didn't have to do the teacher research, but we wanted them to share what they had done. So we decided to ask them to present a poster. And that's what happened. And that's what has happened in many events since then. If you look at the website I shared with you, you can click on some links which will take you to some poster presentations. Because when teachers heard that they don't have to write a report at the end, and also they don't have to do a lot of literature review, they don't have to read a lot of books, because the main problem is coming from their own classroom. They don't need to find a problem by reading articles. They were very relieved and less stressed, and it became more motivating. And so disseminating teacher research can happen through posters, through sharing at a conference. It doesn't have to be through an article. So I'm going to, here are different ways that you can share teacher research. And I'm not going to talk about these very much, but you can see that we have tried different things with posters, with books. I'm going to end just with some advice for teacher educators, because as I said earlier, I think one role for academic researchers and for teacher educators can be to support teachers to do research, and that can start at university. With my students, this is one thing we did in my classes. There are some of my students who have never taught before, and we would encourage them to teach a lesson, to record their lesson, to evaluate it, to explore really the situation, to plan an improvement, and then to teach again, and to evaluate their learning. And this was part of the course that we had. So that's one thing we tried to do, to bring in teacher research into teacher education. To help mentors, to help teacher educators to support teachers or to support student teachers, here are some areas of difficulty that we can identify. Difficult for teachers and difficult for student teachers. to choose a research topic, difficult for them to decide on research questions, difficult for them to decide on the methods, to analyze data, and to know how to share findings. So these are all points in the research process where having a mentor, having a guide is very, very useful. One thing, so just to take one of these stages, and this is the stage of deciding on research questions, having a dialogue with a teacher, having a dialogue with a student teacher can help them a lot to decide on research questions. Let's have an example of one teacher says their students speak in English only to the teacher, but not to each other in pair work or group work. Okay, and the teacher educator, the mentor, can talk with this teacher to try to uncover what the teacher already knows and what the teacher doesn't already know about this situation. So if I ask the teacher, well, in what parts of the class do students speak to you? They may not know the answer. So that can become a research question. If I ask the teacher, well, what do your students think about this situation? What do your students think about speaking in English in class? If the teacher tells me, oh, I'm not really sure what they think, that can become a research question. So areas of uncertainty can become good research questions. But we need to be thinking a lot about the situation, thinking about what do we know, what do we not know about the problem. And that becomes research questions. And that can lead us then to try to find data to answer these questions. And we found that often what teachers don't know is even about their own beliefs or their own perceptions, my perceptions, or they often don't know what the students think about a particular situation, or they often don't know actually when things happen in the class. And so we divided into these three areas. And another thing that's difficult is thinking what kinds of data can we get. And if we think about different kinds of question, actually you can see that different kinds of data are relevant for different kinds of question. For example, to understand a bit better what you believe about a particular issue, you can encourage teachers to reflect in writing or to read other people's ideas. If the teacher needs to know more about what students think, of course, questionnaire is one thing, but it can be a bit difficult to make a questionnaire. So we sometimes encourage just asking students to write their reflections on a piece of paper at the end of the class and to gather the paper. If you want to explore behavior, then obviously getting a recording can be a good idea, but that can be difficult or disruptive. So also asking a critical friend to take notes about your class could be another solution. So this is a way to help teachers think what methods are appropriate for different kinds of question. You can find out more about this based on experience I had with mentors, helping mentors in India and Nepal, in this book, which is also, there is a link on the website that I shared with you earlier. As I said, I think that the web page, which I shared with you, will be the best thing for you to look at if you want to go further. So I am just going to share that one more time into the chat. And so in this handbook comes out of work with mentors, helping mentors, and we have a Facebook group and we've had conferences. So I think that there are some useful new roles for teacher educators and academic researchers in helping teachers, in supporting teachers to do research. But first let's go back to the beginning. and say that academic researchers can do more participatory research work. Academic research which goes against normal university school hierarchies. Participatory research work with teacher associations is something I'd recommend. In service teacher education, we can support teacher research, and we can also try to involve students pre-service in doing practitioner research or collaborative participatory research if they are doing research with teachers. And in conclusion, today I've been going over how to involve teachers in research or with research. So we can collaborate with teachers to research their priorities. As academics, teacher educators can support teachers, student teachers to engage in their own practitioner research and can help with its dissemination. And teachers, and I'd encourage you, students, to think about doing research when you become a teacher and follow some of the links in the website to find out more about how research can be practical, useful, relevant, and of course accessible to other teachers. And I hope that you found this interesting. And I'd like to just relate it finally to a broader issue, I think, in our field of ELT, teaching English in particular, of a kind of centering on British English, American English, British expertise, American expertise. We need to decenter. We need to recognize the local expertise of teachers in different contexts around the world. Professor Jan mentioned how teachers are kind of dominated by textbooks, global course books, and he was encouraging teachers to have agency, to develop their own approaches, which are relevant to the needs of students. And together with Dario Banegas and others from Argentina, from Hari Kuchar from Cameroon, Amal Padwad from India, we have brought out an article where we argue for decentering ELT in general, which involves empowering teachers to develop contextually appropriate thinking and action in relation to the needs of their local contexts. And so I see what I've said today as fitting in with this kind of idea. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Smith. It was such an enrichment presentation. And well, I have to admit that we have used the material that you have just shared. Exploratory Action Research Handbook has been one of our main tools to help our students and other teachers to start with exploratory action research. And now I'm very happy because you have shared more material for us. And well, we are sure that we are going to use them. So thanks a lot for your time, for your presentation, for collaborating with us, because our aim is to help changing the reality of our country, especially in this area, language teaching. So our university, it's producing future English teachers. So we want them to be not just teachers, but also become researchers. And of course, try to adapt what they do according to our own context, to our reality.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that these ideas are relevant to you. And yeah, they have come out of work with teachers, with ordinary teachers in other Latin American contexts originally, and actually have been found useful in other contexts as well, in South Asia. So I'm very happy. So thank you all for your nice comments and your thanks. Thank you. And I'm happy to engage with you today. I wish I could be with you there to meet you and to talk with you more. Maybe that will happen one day.
That would be great. I'm sorry, I had problems with my computer. I couldn't turn my camera off, but I'm very happy, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Bye.